One of the things that is going to be one of the very early parts of the first slide is one of the fundamental lessons that we've learned from an engagement point of view with customers. So there's a lot of effort being made around each platform and each messenger system to come out with their own chatbots, their own virtual assistants. This is actually one of the most damaging things and biggest mistakes we've seen companies make to date is building chatbots and virtual assistants for a single platform and trying to roll them out specifically for a individual messenger. Because the problem is people today want to engage with technology on their terms. They don't want to engage with technology on the terms that you dictate to them, either through choosing their messenger of choice or choosing the application they have to engage with. So one of the fundamental truths that we found out the hard way in some cases is that it's critical to build any type of device that we have from a messaging platform, from a chatbot point of view, as something that can be deployed across every single messenger platform out there in a very easy, intuitive to use way that is the equivalent of talking to another person. That's something that factors into building things in a way that they can be deployed through apps, through multiple devices, and Ray's going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. And we will continue to see how long that takes. So, yeah, you want to give a little bit of color on kind of some of the lessons that you've learned, Ray, as we go?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. We've been building large sites, and you could follow this trajectory. So we've been in the industry a long time, and as we continued to build site experiences, they got larger and larger and more complicated. Literally, for some of the large clients that we work with, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages and documents, we would bring librarians, so folks who would look very strongly at ontology and taxonomy, and come up with an approach that allows us to bring as much content as we could to that experience. And what we found was sites were getting very cumbersome and hard to navigate. And thank God the mobile phone came along and forced us to rethink the way we start to design things. So all of a sudden, we're building responsive experiences that go seamlessly from desktop to tablet to mobile. And all of a sudden, we're learning that the simpler we make things, the better our results. We get higher click-through, we get higher engagement, and we start to see people really leveraging and getting to the content they want to see, right? And that's the power of analytics. Now, all of a sudden, there's this brand new class of devices, whether it's a smartwatch or whether it's a technology like Alexa or coming out Google Home or Google Allo that was recently reached, where we're actually creating a conversation. So all of a sudden, this whole paradigm of us building sites has gotten very, very small, and we're now into what we joke about a lot, right? This movie phone approach. Why don't you just tell me the content you're looking for, and I'll return it to you, right? And so all of a sudden, we're rethinking the way we're building sites very, very strongly. So we followed this curve up, and now we're driving towards this conversational user experience. And what that means is, and what we're really excited about, is now our content leaders, our content strategists driving this taxonomy and ontology thinking are now building it in a completely different way. So how does my content change if I'm surfacing that content audibly, right, through a device that I'm talking to? How does my content change as I flow through different contexts, right? So the way we're looking at things is there's a potential for you to start a conversation on one of our clients' websites, a branded website, and then as you go to Facebook Messenger, maybe you continue that conversation. You go to Google Allo and you have a three-way chat and you start to inject some of the things about the product you're trying to buy or the trip you're trying to learn more about. Then you're waiting at the bus station for your bus, and all of a sudden you have a different conversational experience. Maybe it's through SMS. How do you make sure that you maintain that context throughout that? And we're helping our customers to help share their brands and share their products in a way that customers can interact with it any way they want. And so what we were hoping to get to now is we were hoping to show a video of an approach we've recently done for one of our clients, Patron, where we help them take their site experience and then translate that to a conversational experience using the Amazon Alexa.
Ray, maybe walk away from that.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done in enabling people to shift between static websites, virtual assistants, and live communication.
Yep.
There's a back and forth. I think that's
Right, yeah, exactly. And I think what's pretty exciting about how we've done that is really just accepting how different a mobile device is, right? And that was a big impetus for thinking about the way we create content and we share content really strongly with our customers' customers. So what that means is we started to consider this concept that goes well beyond a browser, because browsers just don't work really well on a mobile phone. Our fingers are too big and the font's too small, and it just doesn't fit. So there's got to be a different paradigm that ideally is leveraging a conversation, whether it's a text-based conversation, a video chat, etc., but then also bringing content together along with it. So we built this platform that we call Ubi that allows us to follow a conversation, and the conversation can be human to human, it could be human to chatbot, etc., but then assemble the content according to that conversation in a way that they can take it with them. So our team here in San Francisco has created this concept called Ubi. It's very strongly based on this card CMS concept that allows you to form that content around your conversation. And we think there's a lot more to happen there, but it's a lot more appropriate to a conversational experience, which is much more consistent with how people naturally interact. But then it's also much more consistent with where devices are headed, where their watches, where their mobile devices, they're all much smaller. But then even different, we see a lot more work that's left to happen when you start to drive conversations as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through right after the Patron example. Yeah. We timed it perfectly, so that worked really well. So these conversational experiences are more conversational than ever, so let's play this video. It's a little hard to see, sorry. Yeah, do we have sound? Yeah.
What if cocktails at home were just as personalized? Introducing the Patron Cocktail Lab. It's a better way to discover perfect cocktails, crafted and curated by world-class bartenders. Answer a few questions about your flavor preferences, and we'll recommend cocktails just for you. Save drinks to your profile, print recipe cards, watch how-to videos, even follow your favorite bartenders. Every month, Patron reviews, tests, and updates the Patron Cocktail Lab with custom recipes submitted by top bartenders around the world. You can also talk to Patron Cocktail Lab, just like you would a bartender. It's currently on Amazon Echo, with more voice platforms coming in the future.
Alexa, ask Patron for something
Spicy.
How about the jalapeno margarita?
Well, okay then. How do we make it?
Muddle one jalapeno coin.
And this is just the beginning. Patron Cocktail Lab is getting smarter every day, and the more you use it, the better your recommendations become. We're continually working to improve the experience and expand it across developing platforms. The Patron Cocktail Lab.
So I think this is a great introduction to the great work that Catherine and the Luminoso team are doing, because as we started this, our client quickly challenged us to think beyond just a preset concept of questions and answers. And so the Alexa platform is pretty good for things like that, but it has some ways to go to be able to go beyond just knowing what I pre-tell it, right? Like I'd like to be able to set up a set of questions and answers that learn over time. So it was pretty cool because we were able to leverage site content, but what if we were able to go out and dig more around the web, learn about the types of conversations people are having around Patron and the potential recipes, and then use that to surface new questions and answers that we can suggest. And so that's where we'd love to take it next, and I think Catherine can tell us a little bit more about how we can do that.
Sure. I think the other thing that's awesome about that particular example is that the impetus around the marketing and things like that is not, hey, you're talking to an AI. It's, hey, you would want to talk to a bartender right now and get some advice and things like that. This is an intelligent agent that acts like that. And I think it's really important that when you're working with agents and when you're doing things like that, that you keep the goal in mind, and the goal is not to have your customer talk to an AI, usually. And I think that's an interesting design principle there. I think one of the things that's going on and that's really important when people think about language in agents is that you sort of think of it as one big picture. And it really has two big components, one of which is generating the language and the other one of which is understanding the language. And usually the mechanisms for these things are really different. and are driven by different problems. And they both have their pluses and their minuses and their difficulties. So when it comes to generating language, one of the big problems is making things human-like and making things understandable, because you can really end up in what's called the uncanny valley very easily. You can end up in a situation where you're talking to your customer, but your customer feels like the interaction is almost human-like, but not. It's very stifled. It's a little weird. The word choice can be very weird. A very early intelligent agent that people were working on at MIT years ago would choose the weirdest questions to ask people. It would choose things like, oh, is that something you could use, in a sport or something like that? It would be a kitchen implement. That's weird. So it's really important that word choice is important, context is important, all that kind of stuff is important. On the flip side of that, understanding is actually difficult as well for the same reasons. People, when they get comfortable, when they're talking to an intelligent agent, they get very comfortable and they talk like they would to a person. And the thing about that is that when we talk to each other, we try to be very interesting. It's a maxim of linguistic philosophy that we are creative in the way we talk. And if we're creative in the way we talk, we use a really difficult language to understand. We use metaphor, we talk creatively, we use interesting adjectives. And when people relax with an agent, they start using that as well. So it becomes really important to be able to actually understand the creative language that's being used in the multitude of different ways. Someone could say spicy, or that they would like something to be spicy. And so that becomes really important. And so for us, what we started doing was taking a platform that was originally built to make search smarter by understanding intent in search queries, and went to market as something that was trying to understand intent in customer feedback analytics and say, well, what can we understand in the intent of discussions that people are having with these agents? We want to bring in all this information that people have that we know that we never say. And if we can bring that into the AI discussion here, and that's our common sense reasoning backbone, we can really be able to understand, the little nuances in the language, and that becomes so important in an agent. Otherwise, you can just be having a conversation and you run right into it. And I know when Siri launched, everybody started talking very naturally to Siri, and that didn't work out very well. And so I think, it was useful, so adoption was driven, but when you're looking for an engagement, something like that, you need to be able to have that conversational importance.
Before you go into this,
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about the concept of common sense AI.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I think one of the things that's really important is basically, if you're looking at a system that's just generated and built with just a machine learning technique, you're going to actually miss out on a lot of the connections that people use. Because, again, we're looking at the sort of underlying knowledge that everybody has. And so when someone's creative with the language that they use, how you solve that problem is that you go back into the language reserves in your head and you access all this, what you would call world knowledge or common sense. The name of the field came way before most of us got involved with it. And, being able to say, can we make an analogy between a simple concept like the way water flows or things like that, and a more complicated concept? And being able to do that really gives you the backbone to be able to dig in and understand complicated language when it comes out. It becomes very important. And it gives us things that you wouldn't learn naturally from just machine learning on the text. But it allows you to machine learn more stuff on the text as well. And so we've been building what is now called a knowledge graph for about 16 years, starting out at MIT and now in Luminoso. And I think that's very important in this kind of situation. It also helps with general machine learning accuracy as well. If you're looking at things, I think people talked earlier about word-to-vec and TensorFlow and all that kind of stuff. If you're just looking at that, you can see that you get a really significant lift from adding in this kind of common sense knowledge. And this is the eye track, so we have a little bit of science in here.
So one question I actually had for both of you before we open up to the audience, and this is more of a crystal ball question, but I think given what both of you are doing in this space, you're well equipped to at least hypothesize. We've got a picture up here of Jarvis, which I think most people view as a great vision of what a true virtual assistant could be someday. How far away are we from something like this? Are we a year? Are we a decade? What do you think from a design point of view and then from a backbone enabling technology point of view?
So we're asking each other questions, and then some of them are hard. I think one of the things is that right now, many things that you're going to have, many interactions you have in a customer service standpoint, or even in an engagement standpoint, are things that really play to the strengths of the way technology is today. You know, there are some things that are very hard for computers and language processing to deal with right now. You know, cause and effect, time, things like that. Some of these things, they're not going to come up in that kind of conversation. So I think really where we are and the advances we've made have really made this a sweet spot for being able to attack that. So you're going to see agents that do a lot of things. I think you're going to see them in the next couple of years, but you know, it's going to be a while before you have, you know, a fully interactive, real robot type agent. I think that's going to be a long time.
So I think it's actually going to start to accelerate more than we've seen. So in that chart before, you saw that it didn't have a time series on it, but if you looked at the progress over the past 10 years versus the progress over the last couple of years, both that is moving incredibly quickly. We were talking about some of the natural language understanding capabilities using traditional methods of smoothing to test how well natural language is understood by algorithms and computers, and it keeps getting better. So it took 10 years to go 30 points, and then in 6 months it went 100 points. And more is better, right? So it moved very, just roughly, right? Very, very quickly. So we're going to start to see these vehicles become very strong over the next couple of years. And what feels a little different just philosophically than previous technology iterations, and now it's very easily accessible. So I was out talking to Google folks this morning, and for pennies on the dollar, you're able to tap into the computing power of what Google taps into, right? And so that's going to accelerate this pace as well. But at the end of the day, what's really exciting is that people want this, right? I've always been looking for something that can please my mom, because anything that goes wrong with technology is always my fault, so I get a call a couple of times a day, no matter how many Genius Bar tickets I set up for her, how many meetings, it's always my fault. And this is what she wants, right? She wants to be able to ask and get a response. She doesn't want to have to go to a website. And so there's a strong pent-up demand. It was about 2 years ago people started staring at their phones more than they stared at any other screen, and the only way to reach that quickly and appropriately is with artificial intelligence, and it is with conversational experiences. So I think it's years, not decades, before we get to the point where people don't realize they're talking to these devices anymore. I know when my kids talk to my Alexa, they know they have to preface it with Alexa, but they're very natural. And it surprises me that it can recognize my daughter's 4-year-old conversations and does a decent job.
Question specific around the channels, and specifically around authentication. Do you guys have a strategy or solution to handle authentication, especially for industries like e-commerce or banking?
Yeah, so I think there isn't a silver bullet that we're seeing out there. So you're starting to see that mobile device, obviously, for years now. It's becoming your single footprint. But what we're not seeing anything that's obvious. So it's about how do you connect with APIs and drive connections through things like wallet and pay and other technologies. But there's nothing obvious there. And you see that, right? Like everybody wonders, well, why can't I unlock my doors with my Alexa at home, right? Well, because that's a security problem, right? So there's not a good answer yet, but I think it'll move very quickly. If you look in places like China and others, they've connected accounts directly to WeChat, and then all of a sudden, people are buying everything from their coffee to their cars over chat. So it's solvable.
And I think more and more with Internet of Things, you're seeing now companies are saying, look, we need to understand authentication, we need to understand security with this. I mean, I think when people started out, they didn't pay as much attention to that, but I think now that's a top priority for a lot of those companies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.